Sacrifice to the Emperor sounds ceremonial. It sounds like a procession. Incense smoke rising through vaulted arches, a crowd on their knees, a blade held high above someone chosen. That is not what this is. The Emperor of mankind does not require ritual, he requires throughput. He is interred on the golden throne beneath the Imperial Palace on Terra, wired into a machine of plasma conduits, copper coils, and ancient circuitry that no living Mechanicus priest fully understands. That machine keeps him functional. And what keeps the machine functional is a continuous, scheduled intake of human psychic energy. Nobody calls it maintenance when it is painted gold, but that is the accurate word. Every day, thousands of psykers are processed through the black ships of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, evaluated by the Scholastia Sicana, sorted, stripped down, and either assigned a role in the Imperium's psychic infrastructure or redirected to fuel the Astronomicon directly. The paperwork exists. The quotas are filed. The administratum tracks intake grades and transfer orders. This is not a ceremony. It is a supply chain. Understanding it as religious theater is the misunderstanding the ecclesiarchy depends on. Frame it as martyrdom, and it feels chosen. Frame it as maintenance, and the picture clarifies considerably. The official justification is not unreasonable, which is the first thing worth understanding. The Astronomicon is a psychic beacon projected from Terra through the warp. Navigators of the Navi's nobility, those rare mutant aristocrats born with a third eye that reads currents no ordinary instrument can detect. Use it to guide vessels through the warp without losing course. Without the Astronomicon, warp travel becomes guesswork. Without warp travel, a million worlds lose contact with each other. The Imperium of Man does not hold together by proximity. It holds together by interstellar supply lines, and those lines run through the warp. Cut the beacon, and Forge worlds, like Mars, lose raw material shipments. Astra Militarum crusades lose reinforcement. Hive worlds with populations in the billions lose food. The math is stark. Thousands of psykers sustain trillions of citizens. The Adeptus Astronomica manages the psychic choir. The administratum tracks the quotas. The ecclesiarchy writes the theology that makes compliance feel sacred. Each institution does its part, and each part is rational within its own frame. Translation: the cost-benefit logic is airtight as long as you are not the cost. The section feels deliberately like a grim energy policy, because that is what it is. The Imperium is not wrong that the Astronomicon matters. It is not fabricating the dependency. The beacon has to burn. The question is never whether someone pays. The question is who and what machinery collects them. The black ships do not ask. They sweep hive cities, feral worlds, shrine planets. A child in an underhive manifests precognition after a traumatic event. A factory worker on an agri-world begins hearing warp voices through the walls of her HAB unit. The detection mechanisms vary by world. The outcome does not. Within weeks, both individuals are shackled in null collars etched with hexagrammic wards and loaded into steel cargo holds lined with psychic dampeners. Sisters of Silence move through the holds without speaking. They do not need to speak. Their presence erases psychic noise at the source. The ships are enormous. The silence inside them is not the silence of peace. On Terra, the Scholastia Sicana runs the evaluations. Psykers pass through chambers layered in copper coils and incense smoke, monitored by servo skulls recording biometric and psychic output data. Iron gates grind shut between stages. Evaluation is not gentle. Some psykers combust during testing. Some collapse. The acceptable loss rate is calculated in advance. Those who survive are sorted. The genuinely exceptional become sanctioned battle psykers for the Astra Militarum, attached to regiments as Primaris psykers. Some become astropaths, soul-bound to the Emperor in a process that blinds them but anchors their minds, spending their lives transmitting and receiving messages across void distances until their eyes bleed and their bodies quit. A smaller number enter more specialized training within the Inquisition or the Adeptus Astrotelepathica itself. Many are redirected to the Adeptus Astronomica. This is where devotion becomes throughput. There is no drama at the intake gate. Bronze aquilae hang above the threshold. Parchment orders stamped in red wax authorize the transfer. A classification code replaces whatever name the administratum bothered to record. The individual moves from one column of the ledger to another, and the ledger does not feel anything about it. What happens in the Astronomican vaults is not symbolic. The psykers assigned to fuel the beacon are seated in rows of metal thrones. Spinal ports and neural cables connect them directly to the amplifier network. The room smells of ozone and burning copper. Lumen globes flicker over rows of slack bodies. The warp strain begins immediately, a sustained draw on the mind's psychic capacity that does not resemble anything the person has experienced before, because nothing else in ordinary life makes this demand. Within hours, eyes glaze white, skin desiccates. The cognitive structures that make a person begin to degrade under load. Within days, most are husks. This is measurable psychic output. The Adeptus Mechanicus has instrumentation for it. The output is logged. The thrones are not designed for longevity. They are designed for extraction. There is no appeal form for a lighthouse. Choice ends before this room. It ends on the black ship. For most, it ends the moment a planetary governor authorizes collection and the Inquisition stamps compliance on the order. The exit paths close in sequence, and they close early. Each stage of the process is bureaucratically airtight. The Inquisitor authorizes, the governor cooperates, the Scholastia grades, the Astronomica assigns. No single institution makes the final call alone. They share the decision across enough layers that accountability dissolves before it reaches the individual being processed. By the time someone understands the outcome, there is nowhere to redirect the objection. That is not a flaw. It is the design. Zoom out, and the logic tightens further. The Astronomican enables warp navigation. Warp navigation sustains the supply chains that keep a million worlds functional. Those worlds generate stress, mutation, and warp exposure through wars and industrial catastrophe, which produces more psykers in the next generation. The black ships harvest them. The cycle closes. Failure does not break the system. Failure feeds it. If intake falls below threshold, the beacon dims. Navigators lose the signal in marginal warp conditions. Ships are lost. When ships are lost, sectors destabilize. Destabilized sectors see increased warp anomaly activity. Warp anomaly activity accelerates psychic mutation in the surrounding population. The next generation of black ship sweeps produces more candidates. Theas. Translation. The mechanism that creates the need also responds to the need failing to be met by generating more supply. The High Lords of Terra cannot reform this. Their authority requires interstellar cohesion, which requires the Astronomican, which requires the intake system. The Adeptus Mechanicus cannot replace the Golden Throne. The plasma reactors and archaeotech circuitry woven through it are only partially understood, and the partially understood parts are not replicable with current Mechanicus knowledge. The Inquisition cannot halt processing without triggering the sector collapses they exist to prevent. Hololithic star maps in command chambers across the Imperium still blink red where fleet signals have gone silent. The Administratum has category codes for those losses. They are filed under expected operational variance. Every power center depends on the system functioning. Collapse would cost more than continuation. That calculation has been made implicitly by every High Lord and Fabricator General who has examined the numbers. The conclusion is always the same. The arrangement is not temporary. It is equilibrium. And equilibrium in the 41st millennium is always paid for in advance, in bodies, filed under a different line item. The Golden Throne hums. The Astronomican burns across the warp in a cone of psychic light that navigators have followed for 10,000 years. The Adeptus Custodes stand watch in auramite armor in the deep vaults of the Imperial Palace. silent, permanent, guarding a machine they cannot repair, and a god they cannot wake. The intake columns on the data slates are updated daily. Replacement shipments arrive on schedule. The warp lanes stay navigable. Hive worlds receive their grain shipments. Crusades launch on time. The psykers assigned to the Astronomican vaults do not have names in the final records. They have classification grades, intake numbers, and output logs. The incense smoke drifts up through vaulted ceilings above the thrones and dissipates into the recycled air of the Imperial Palace without incident. That is what survival looks like from the outside. From the inside, it looks like a throne wired to your spine and the slow recognition that the room you are in has no door. The Emperor is worshipped across 1,000,000 worlds as the divine protector of humanity. He is the God Emperor. The Lectitio Divinitatis has spent 10,000 years building the theology. The ecclesiarchy maintains the shrines, trains the confessors, and funds the cathedrals. The faithful genuinely believe. That belief is not false comfort. It sustains the psychological cohesion of an empire too large to hold together by logistics alone. And every day, that God is kept alive by feeding him pieces of the species he is worshipped for saving. The beacon shines because someone stops shining. The system does not rage about this. It does not pause to acknowledge the irony. The throne hums. The choir burns. The ships return. The next intake wave is already in transit from the outer reaches. To be sacrificed to the Emperor is not to stand before him in glory. It is to become a measured output in a cathedral-sized generator, logged, replaced, and forgotten in the same administrative cycle. The Imperium calls it holy. The Administratum calls it compliance. The Mechanicus calls it output. In practice, it is maintenance. And maintenance is what keeps the lights on.